you. Thanks so much.
Hello and welcome to Alta Live. I am so excited to welcome you today for a discussion on modern quilting with two leaders of the Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild. My name is Beth Spotswood, and I am Alta's digital editor. The Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild is an ever-growing group of creatives who are helping demonstrate the artistry of quilting, and it is as relevant as ever. They're attracting a new generation of quilters and doing such incredible work. I'm really excited to show you some of that today. LAMQG leaders Yvonne Miller and Greg Stewart join Alta Live. They're going to detail the way modern quilting differs from the traditional version, the way that I've at least thought of quilting. Detail how this historically social craft was able to thrive during the pandemic, and we're going to share some examples of their work. Greg is outgoing president of LA's Modern Quilt Guild and soon to be vice president. Yvonne is the incoming president. Before we begin, some brief housekeeping. This conversation series happens weekly every Wednesday at 12:30. Alta Live is the digital event series of Alta Journal. We are a quarterly journal focused on California and the West. You can join us. You can buy this issue, where our current issue is Made in California, celebrating makers, creators, and their crafts. Which is why we're talking about quilting today. I'm excited to kind of explore this particular craft. If you're interested in this issue, you can buy it online, altaonline.com. You can subscribe to read all of our articles for as little as $3 a month, or join us as a member. We host weekly events like this, a monthly California book club. Anyway, if you like what we do here today, I so hope you will check us out. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions for Greg or Yvonne, or share your thoughts about quilting. We will chat for about 30 minutes and get to as many of your questions as we can. Today's interview will all be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later this afternoon. We're also going to send you links how you can follow the LA Modern Quilt Guild, the Global Modern Quilt Guild. Anything that pops up, we will send you that information along with a link to this recording. So check your email for that later today. With that, I'd love to ask everyone to let us know where you're zooming in from. Hi, Oakland, South San Francisco. I am up north in Novato, California today. Yvonne, where are you zooming in from?
Los Angeles.
And Greg, what about you?
Same thing, Los Angeles.
LA. Welcome everyone. Savannah, San Francisco, LA, Emerald Isle, North Carolina, Roseville. Welcome everyone. I'm so excited to see such a big crowd today. I'll kind of kick us off with a little bit of a softball here. Tell us about the Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild, its history, and what you do. What is the guild? What is the purpose of the guild? Greg, take it away.
Sure. I'm very excited, and thank you so much, Beth. The Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild was founded 13 years ago, and it was founded by three women that were just, crafters and became quilters, but wanted to take a twist on it. And this has really led to being an international program where we now have the Modern Quilt Guild, and then there are all these chapters that fall under that. And we're represented across the globe, which Beth will be sharing with you a little bit later on. And so we're excited to tell you more about Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild as we go.
Yvonne, can you tell, what does your guild do? How do you assign projects? What if I want to join the guild? Yeah. What do I get?
Well, it's really a community of crafters, and these are men and women who sew, who create quilts primarily, but also, beautiful garments and bags and all kinds of different little handmade projects. And we share those ideas with each other. One of the greatest things that I love about the Guild is that we bounce a lot of ideas off of each other and really inspire each other. And we teach each other techniques that we've learned over the years. So that we're kind of constantly improving on the craft. We provide a series of meetings, workshops, classes, trunk shows. Trunk show is when a speaker comes in and shows us a whole range of the work that they've done, bring 20 or 25 quilts for us to look at and touch and really examine. And we do a series of things, to kind of appreciate each other too. So we do swaps and giveaways and things like that. And yeah, it's great.
How many members do you have?
Currently, I think we're nearing 80 right now. We saw kind of a resurgence of membership over the pandemic, actually. So we've gained quite a few members over the last year or two.
If it's okay with you both, I'm going to start sharing my screen just so we can kind of give our audience a look at what you do. Now, this was one of a number of photos that you sent me, Yvonne, of this looks like you were meeting outdoors during the pandemic. So you would hold your for COVID safety, presumably, you would have these meetings outdoors. Can you, I mean, it seems like I guess one of my questions is quilting I think of it as something social. There's a social component historically to quilting bees, quilting circles. Traditionally, women would get together and quilt. Can you talk about, you mentioned community, but that social aspect and why that was so important to continue during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wanted connection during the isolation of the pandemic. And we were really trying to search for ways, because we were used to meeting in person and being able to look at these beautiful quilts in person, touch them, talk about them, hang out with each other. And we were really searching for ways to kind of keep that same sort of feel, but how do we do that online? So we transitioned to Zoom meetings for a good portion of the pandemic. And then recently we've started meeting in person once a quarter. So we're kind of hybrid today.
Got it. I want to kind of dive into some of what I think of as modern quilting, but can you describe the difference between what I think of traditional quilting versus modern quilting? Is there a finite list of things that make a piece a modern quilt as opposed to a quilt?
I'm going to take that one.
Loaded question.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yvonne
really?
and I were talking yesterday, and it's very controversial. And I think when I explain it, it will help to make sense to everyone. So typically with modern quilting, I'm going to read a couple of the things that we use at the Modern Quilt Guild to define modern quilting. It's when a member or a sewer actually incorporates the use of bold colors and prints. It can be high contrast and graphic areas of solid colors, improvisational piecing, minimalism, and expansive negative space. These are the key things that we look for. But just to further define, there's such a fine line that oftentimes they're called modern traditionalism. And this is where, a member or someone sewing will take a traditional pattern and blow up the scale or, change just the values of it, the proportions, and just to make it their own and to make it unique. And I think that's one of the key things because, I was taught by my grandmother how to quilt, but yet, as I quilted for many, many years and found out about the Modern Quilt Guild, you kind of get the bug. You like, what can I do different? How can I push the envelope? And so I think that's really what defines it for us.
And you mentioned that this is, I'm just kind of going through, I have some photos of the guild in action here. But you mentioned that was a bit controversial. Who would take umbrage with that? Or why does it need to be defined so specifically?
Well, as modern quilters, we don't feel it needs to be defined so specifically. And I think it's just, sometimes people, if you're very honed in on traditional craft where it's really all about your hand sewing, oftentimes you're just very passionate about it. And then when you see this quilt that's 75% a solid piece of fabric, and then all this intense hand labor or machine labor in a corner, that can really throw someone off. And so with modern quilters, that's why we recognize that traditional quilters can also be, have a modern flair or modern style as well.
I noticed a lot of diversity in your group, not just necessarily with women of different ages, people of different races, but there are men, there a lot of, I mean, it is not grandmas sitting around.
Yeah, I
talking
think
about.
everybody has that sort of idea. When you talk about quilting in general, everyone has this idea of little grannies working together on a quilt. But really, it's just like any other modern craft, knitting or crocheting. We're seeing all of these types of crafts kind of taking on new life these days, and a lot of younger people are connecting to, historical roots. They're looking at, different art forms to express themselves. I think, I think there are crafters and quilters everywhere across all kinds of, ethnic, religious, whatever kind of lines that are out there. And it's awesome.
Yeah. Is that something specific to LA? Is that, with the International Modern Quilt Guild, or is that kind of the situation across the globe?
I think it's across the globe, but I think there are really some very specific regions that have really large membership with modern quilters. Obviously, the Los Angeles, then in Texas, there are several very large guilds, Portland, Oregon, in the Northeast, Australia, London, Canada. So we're just seeing this growth coming from all different regions. And as a board member, the board is divided into 5 regions. There are 5 region representatives, and 4 of them are in the US, and then the 5th one is international. And so, the region 1 is the West Coast, which is what I represent.
And
so
that's
it's
of the
definitely
Modern Quilt
diverse.
Guild, the overall Modern Quilt
Yes,
Guild,
yes,
of which LA is the founding local guild.
correct.
Does LA have a specific aesthetic vibe to quilting, to modern quilting?
Yvonne, you want this one?
I don't know that we do. I think if I could say anything that is consistent is that it's inconsistent. It's always different. And people do a lot of exploration. I think, sometimes we have one guild member who is extremely inspired by Disney. So much of her work is, just kind of ruminations on Disney characters or Disney movies or colors or, something like that. And I think people are taking inspiration from all different sorts of places. So the consistent thing is that it's all very different.
What is the pinnacle for those modern quilters? Is there kind of some version of the Oscars that Pulitzer of quilting to achieve?
Absolutely. And
What
I
is
would
it?
say that it would be with QuiltCon.
Tell me about QuiltCon, please.
Yes, it's an annual convention. It typically goes East Coast, West Coast, back and forth. And it's where, thousands of quilters, modern quilters gather, and also traditional quilters come to see the work. And where, there are hundreds of quilts on display that are judged. People enter their quilts into competition during the fall of the year. So right now people are entering. Right now we have over 550 quilts that have been entered, and the show will be in February. And later on in November, these quilts are judged and juried, and then there's recognition given, and very significant prize money is given out for these
really?
winners. Yes.
Can you tell me about the what is the community quilts?
Here is an example. The one you're looking at right now happens to be the Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild Community Quilt for last year. For the past 3 years, I was the chairperson for the Community Quilt Outreach. And so what happened is each year there was a committee and we would put together a color palette and a theme. And like for this one, it was about angles and it was about these specific colors. And then each guild has the opportunity to work as a guild, many members working on it, or individual members can join up and create their own little group. And then there are about 300 quilts that get submitted to QuiltCon and they're on exhibit there. And, it's just something that, what the whole purpose is that these quilts are then either given to a charity or they're raffled off or sold to raise money for a charity. And that's the community aspect that we really push with the QuiltCon. And, a lot of guilds also have a lot of community outreach as well, where they're doing things for different organizations within their own community.
Yeah, I would say that that's one of the things you'd asked about, the sort of social or community element of quilting. And whenever there is a disaster or people in need, there are always quilters there who want to provide quilts. And our guild is a great example of a group of people who get together and provide for others during hardship times. But we're seeing people do that across the globe. Like when people are in need, let's send them warmth, something that will help them feel good.
To add to that, Yvonne, I wanted to mention, even like with Parkland High, with the shootings, Pulse nightclub, the California fires, these are all examples of when guilds really came to action to provide quilts for those families, friends, just as an outreach. And there were thousands that were donated during the fires. And there was one of our sister guilds up in the valley, they were trying to put all these quilts together because some people would just send a quilt top, some would send material, but they wanted to turn them into quilts to give to these people that lost everything in these fires.
That is, I never thought of it before, but it's interesting because this is both an art piece and something that not only provides warmth, but comfort. It's, handmade items feel different than mass-produced items.
Absolutely.
How I don't understand how multiple people could work on something like this. Do you get a square? I realize this is about angles, so they're not really squares, but, and are there, at some point, are there too many cooks in the kitchen? I imagine everyone's got a vision.
We divide it up pretty well. This example, you can see that there are specific sections. And so each person who contributed to this quilt actually had one of those sections, one of those colors. They're not all squares, so that's something that makes it non-traditional, but each of those sections is a person that worked on this. And then another person worked on putting them all together. So sewing all of these different sections together and creating that. And then another person worked on quilting it. So quilting is the actual stitching that goes through the layers of the quilt. And then another person worked on putting the binding or the outline, what you see the border around it.
It's a lot of trust.
Yeah.
What if someone really
planning.
screws it up?
Right.
I do. I wanted to, I think that this, for me, this is the last one. I do want to go back and just show where all the map of the guilds around the globe. But, when I this, truly to me, it looks like a modern quilt. This looks like something that was at QuiltCon. When you're going to QuiltCon, is there a grand, the winner, and is LA ever won? Have you guys ever taken home the golden sewing machine or whatever it is?
It's best of show, and it's for individual members. And I'm sure in the early years, I would like to think that someone from the Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild has won, but they have won many of the other awards, definitely in the past 7 years that I've been affiliated with the Guild.
Yeah, there are multiple categories in the show. So you might enter a quilt into hand piece or hand quilting, and another one might be improv quilting. So there are
Improv quilting.
yeah, so there are
What's
different
improv quilting?
That's when you don't really follow a pattern. You kind of just sew stuff together. You might have a theme or a color scheme, but you're not really following instructions and being specific or intentional about your cutting or anything like that.
The last quilt you showed, Beth, the one that had the orange, green, and yellow, that one, that's improvisational quilting, for example, where the members were just told, do things with sharp angles. And so then you were given 2 colors of fabric, and you were to just sew it together in whatever you thought would best represent angles for this competition. This one wasn't actually competition, it was just to be in the community quilt challenge.
That is so much trust. I really am amazed at, perhaps it's the control freak in me, but just your willingness to let your fellow craftspeople do their own thing. Okay, so this
there's a lot of pride.
It's beautiful, beautiful work. So I was checking out the Modern Quilt Guild's, the International Modern Quilt Guild's website, and there's a place where you can find the one near you. And I was so surprised, perhaps I'm embarrassed to report that I was so surprised to see just how extensive this organization reaches. There's one in Kiev, Ukraine. You see a lot in Australia, India, the Middle East. It's extraordinary. Is this all recent? I mean, since 2009, when Los Angeles formed?
Yes, all of that's happened since 2009. And really, I would say the biggest growth has been over the past 5 years.
Why do you
for the outreach? I just think the word is getting out. People are discovering modern quilting, and they've tried traditional quilting, or they've never quilted at all, which a lot of our members say. And I think they just get turned on to it, get excited, get the sense of community, the sense of giving, and it's just a great group of friends that work together.
That's someone asked here, and I don't know if you know this. Lawrence Nelson asks, when did the term quilting bee originate? Do you know the history of the?
I know for a fact that bee is a term for a social gathering or party. So I think when you talk about quilting bee, it's like a quilting party, or sort of a shared work and companionship party kind of thing.
And Beth, it definitely started off with traditional quilters, but it's continued. And modern quilters, we have several bees within the Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild, and it's a group of typically, say, 8 to 10 people. And it's more when people are able to meet in person and meet at someone's home, and you sit around and you work on a project. Oftentimes it'll be everyone doing a project and then shifting it and working on it so that all the members touch this one quilt. Actually, each member is going to get a quilt in the end in some of the bees. So they do it different ways, but it's just a group of friends that love to quilt together.
Are there, is anyone allowed to join? Do you need to be an experienced quilter, have a certain degree of skill?
Absolutely not. Anyone can join who's interested in quilting. And it's a great resource for people to actually learn. Because you start to see what's out there and the kind of techniques and all the beautiful fabric that's available to you to work with. And it's a great resource for anyone who's kind of thinking about it or interested in quilting.
It looks like just in terms of nationally at least, it's an explosion of modern quilting. Do traditional quilters have the same kinds of guilds and groups and level of popularity? Do you guys hang out, or is it like the sharks and the jets?
I would say that we have members that are in both traditional as well as modern. Several of
Really?
the Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild members are part of the West Side Quilters, and there's other, traditional quilting groups in Los Angeles and around the country. And so I think, you just kind of find your own niche, like we have maybe 3 members now that are members of multiple modern quilt guilds, because each one has their own flair and way of doing things, and they have different guest speakers, so you kind of get more money for your buck.
Oh, do you offer classes or seminars?
So over the course of the year, we have like a calendar of programming where we bring in professional quilters, or people who are really well known in the quilt world, to give workshops, to give presentations, trunk shows. And it's really great opportunity for our guild members to kind of get to know people, network, and learn from people who are at the top of their game.
Greg, can you tell me a little bit? I was confessing before we went live that I wanted a jacket made out of a repurposed old quilt, which I've been seeing a lot. And you had mentioned that this is popping up in the fashion industry, or that has been kind of emerging in the fashion industry, of quilts as clothing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm actually going to let Yvonne, because she was yesterday going over it and knows all the specific names and things of that type from the last quilt.
Hit me, Yvonne.
I was bringing up the fact that A$AP Rocky, the rapper, wore a quilt to the Met Gala last year. And it was actually a repurposed quilt that someone's grandmother had worked on. And a fashion brand, ERL, had found it and asked a professional quilter, Zach Foster, if he would work with them on creating this piece for A$AP Rocky based on the quilt that they found at a thrift store. And so, they collaborated on this, and A$AP Rocky wore it to the Met Gala as kind of a cape. And he got to the top of the stairs and he threw it off. And underneath it was this red sort of flannel, amazing kind of piece. And he created his own red carpet at the top of the stairs. So,
oh, chic.
But, you're seeing it on the runway too. People are, especially like Burberry, Coach, Chanel, you're seeing capes, coats, jackets, purses, all different kinds of pieces.
And Beth, you and I were discussing Gucci beforehand, and even with Gucci, they're doing a lot of patchwork clothing. I mean, that's one of Alessandro's greatest talents, is putting all these different bold prints together. Dolce & Gabbana does the same thing. So many brands out there, as Yvonne was speaking.
Is that ultra modern quilting? Is that even the next level? Do you don't just work exclusively on quilts? I think, Yvonne, you had mentioned at the top of the show that you do bags. Mm-hmm. Is it just up to if I'm showing up at a guild meeting, I can just work on whatever, or are we all, if it's not a community quilt, we're all just working on whatever project we've got going on?
Yeah, so all of us have any number of projects ongoing at any time, that we're working on at home. And one of the best parts of our guild meetings is our show and tell time. So it's basically people who just come up and, like you saw in those photos in the park, they're just showing the work that that they've completed or that's in progress. And it's all different kinds of things. Sometimes people bring their quilts, but sometimes it's pillows or bags or smaller handmade items.
Dan Lewis points out in the comments, the Huntington Library in San Marino has a current exhibit. We're big fans and partners here at Alta of the Huntington Library, has a current exhibit on the quilts of Gee's Bend. So check that out, quilting fans. It is 1 o'clock. So I just want to extend deep gratitude to Yvonne Miller and Greg Stewart for taking the time to join us today and share the extraordinary work and community of the Los Angeles Modern Quilt Guild. Thank you both so very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Yvonne.
I think you guys are just fabulous. And I'm so inspired to bust out my sewing machine that is somewhere in the garage. Yes.
We'll send you a link to our next meeting.
Okay.
Join us virtually.
Thank you so much. Folks, before you leave, I do want to invite you to next Wednesday's Alta Live. We're doing a big switch. We're stepping away from crafts next week. We are going to speak with Julian Smith, who wrote an article in this issue about an extraordinary rescue of 2 firefighters who were trapped in the Trinity Alps. We will be joined by the helicopter pilot, Julian, the author, as well as the helicopter pilot, Lieutenant Commander Derek Schrammel, who rescued those 2 firefighters. And so we're going to hear the whole exciting tale. Join us for that next week. That is Wednesday, November 2nd at 12:30. Check out LA's Modern Quilt Guild, especially their Instagram. It is like heavenly eye candy. The whole thing is just so fun to look at. So again, thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and especially Yvonne and Greg.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.